Hello and welcome to Late Night Chat. My guest this evening is the fantasy author, Angus Watson.
Hello.
Hello, internet people. This is going to be a late night chat. We're both armed with a beverage and it's going to be frank and adult. This is your only warning. Expect adult content. That's all I'm going to say.
I'm not getting naked, no.
Okay, let's save that for later.
Well, I might get naked.
Okay. So here's the thing I don't know to begin with. So what's your origin story? How did you get into fantasy? Like, how did you get into reading it first? I'm presuming you read it before you started writing it.
Yeah, only just. I mean, I read fantasy a bit when I was a kid.
Right.
I got into reading through Douglas Adams, through Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Got into the love of reading. I remember dragging friends into the school bookshop going, "You've got to read this book. Look at this line about, the filing cabinet and beware of the leopard." Nothing has ever been funnier. And then I got quite pretentious and I used to read sort of, literary fiction and foreign stuff. And then probably about 12 years ago, my brother handed me a Joe Abercrombie book and a Scott Lynch book and said, "Read this." He's a mad fantasy reader. He's read all of yours, all of my, he's read everyone's, much more than I have. Much. Anyway, he handed me these Joe Abercrombie books and Scott Lynch book and said, "Read this." And I said, "I'm not reading your nerd crap. I'm too high for reading this nonsense." And he said, "No, go do it. Read 70 pages of each. If you don't like it, stop." All right, fair enough. And I read it and I was blown away, absolutely blown away. I just thought these were the best books I read in a very long time. They were just as intelligent as anything I'd ever read. Just as funny, just as good, and it just opened up my eyes completely that you could actually have a lot of fun while writing or reading with these crazy fun worlds and shake it up a bit. And I'd been meaning to write historical fiction because I quite like my Patrick O'Brien, all that sort of thing. Bernard Cornwell to an extent. I don't really respect Bernard Cornwell, but I love I love the worlds he writes about.
Yeah.
And then I was at the time, in my 20s, I sort of fannied around and I did sort of temp jobs in merchant banks and that sort of thing, all the time saying, "I want to be a writer." But then when I was about 30, my girlfriend at the time got me a creative writing course and said, "Look, you're always going on about wanting to be a writer, go on this." And I went on it. At the same time, my bank offered me voluntary redundancy, which I took. And I finished my creative writing course and did a freelance features writing course. And I took a year off and I wrote a book, which was rubbish, but it was a fantasy book, strangely enough, having not read any fantasy for, ever. Right. But it was crap. All the characters were the same. There was no suspense. All the characters were me, basically. And then I took this freelance features writing course and said to myself, at the end of it, if I can make 500 quid this month, £1,000 the next month, 1,500 quid the next month, I am allowed to try and pursue this career. And I did, nearly. But within 3 or 4 months, I was writing for the Telegraph and the FT really regularly, and then every now and then the Times and the Daily Mail. So I spent 10 years writing mostly for the Telegraph and the FT, and doing things like spending a day in an otter sanctuary in Devon, just looking after otters and sea lions.
Wow.
Which was great. Yeah.
That sounds cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. It was really nice. I'd sit there on a hillside in Wiltshire looking at owls on a Tuesday afternoon, just thinking, this is better than being in an office.
Yep.
And they sent me to America to look for Bigfoot, which is good. I went up to Orkney Islands to dive on Scapa Flow, look at the old, sunken World War I German fleet that's up there. Mm-hmm. Did loads of groovy stuff. Cycled from Bristol to London, walked from Bristol to London as well. And then... why am I banging on about this? Yeah, anyway, so that all sort of fell a bit flat because papers collapsed with the internet. They won't tell you because they control the newsman, but they're dead. They don't have any money anymore, so they couldn't pay me to do fun things anymore. And at the same time, we did an article for the Telegraph on hill forts. And I went down to Dorchester. I went to Maiden Castle, which is the best hill fort in England, and met this guy with a huge beard at Dorchester Museum, and then we looked around the museum. I did my research beforehand, so I knew a bit about the Iron Age, although there's not much to know. And you can do all the research I've ever done in 5 minutes on Wikipedia, and all the rest is just conjecture. I walked up this hill fort with him and said, what was it like? Was it like Conan the Barbarian? From my research, it seems like it was, big muscly men rescuing women from snake temples. And then he went, "No, it's not the best of our knowledge. That's what it was like. In fact, Conan the Barbarian is probably about the best testament we have of what it was like in the period." And I thought, awesome! I'm going to write about this. And that was combined at the same time I was reading, Joe Abercrombie and Scott Lynch, and I thought I'm gonna write this. I'm going to fancy it up a bit. So having read Caesar's diaries at school, I always thought that they were a pile of bollocks because, age 15 when we read them, I thought, hang on a minute, this is the only report we have of Caesar's invasion, and it says, I took over loads and loads of people, well enough to take the country, but we decided not to because, I just didn't want to. I went back to Rome after a few months because, well, whatever. So it was clearly that the Britons beat him, and it was, and history was lying to itself, saying, he left with treaties made with his, head held high. Nonsense. He was beaten roundly. So I decided to write that story. So sort of the end of Iron Age Britain and how they defeated Caesar. It was I'm sorry, I'm banging on for a bit. I just remember that a week after I did the Hillfort article, I did, well, it might have been 2 weeks, I did one on a Stone Age toolmaker.
Right.
We went up another hill fort, this one further over, somewhere in Sussex. And we went up a hill fort. It just happened to be where the Stone Age tool mine was as well, but it had later been an Iron Age hill fort. And opposite, across the valley, was another Iron Age hill fort. And I thought, hang on a minute, these aren't just a hill fort. This is a connected thing. There were hill forts absolutely everywhere. There was a huge society going on. There was lots of crap happening. There were epic wars, love affairs, and thousands of years before the Romans came. We don't know anything about it because of, there was no written history, and the Romans obliterated any spoken history in their 400-year occupation.
So this is what led you to start writing the Age of Iron. Yeah.
Wow. And so I got, very, very unexcitingly, or unoriginally, I wanted a reluctant hero, aged around 40, which I was when I wrote it. Hot woman, obviously, who was mysterious and weird and a bit younger. Nothing original at all, and a mysterious child. I was quite into the idea of, a relationship with an adult and a child, a pure platonic thing. So at the time I've always been a bit dismayed that you can't walk past a playground, and lean over the fence and watch the children play anymore, because, then you get moved along.
Yeah.
Give you funny looks. I can do that now. Now I'm a parent. I can sit there and watch the children play. It's okay. But when you're not, I don't like that. I think that's wrong. Anyway.
How long did it take you to write the first novel then?
Probably about 1.5 years, maybe.
Right.
I mean, not long. I was very lucky in that I was professional. I was writing anyway.
Yeah.
Full time. So it wasn't a big switch to suddenly carry on writing full time. And my now wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, who works in a hedge fund, said, "Look, let's be honest here. I make in 10 seconds what you make in a year. You might as well take some time off and have a go at your book." So thanks to her, I got the chance to have a crack at it.
Right. And you then started sending it out to agents once you were ready?
Yeah. Sent it out to a few agents, chose one, and then she hawked it around the publishers, got Orbit, and it was brilliant. I imagine you had the same sort of deal. You get a I can't remember how it happened, get an email or a phone call saying we're going to have your book.
Mm-hmm. I remember where I was when I got the phone call. I was driving home from work and my phone rang, and I thought that's a bit of weird time, and I never look at my phone when I'm driving. So I pulled off into the car park of a Dunelm in Leeds, where I was living at the time, and so it said a missed call from my agent. I thought that's a bit weird, so I rang her back, and then that's when she rang me and said, yes, they're going to take your book. They sent them out on a week's, they get to look at them for a week before everybody else, and they made me an offer on that in that week, because if they didn't, it goes out in general release to all the publishers. But yeah, Orbit made an offer, and that was Battle Mage, and that was my first book. The other reason I should say, which I haven't mentioned, that one of the reasons we're doing this, we're talking, is that this week, or this month anyway, marks the 5th anniversary since Battle Mage came out, and it'll be the 6th anniversary, more or less, since your
exactly 6th, and the 5th of my second book, which
that's right,
came out at the same time as your first.
Yeah.
Well, wow. So I don't remember when I heard it, but I remember when I first got my first freelance commission, which was an article in the Evening Standard in London. I remember exactly where I was. I was in a pub. I remember the phone call. I remember walking out and taking it. But then being a freelance, I had that 1,000 more times. But every time is cool, because every time you pitch an idea, you know, you write something. Hi, there's this, you know, this guy who trains kestrels in Leicestershire. I want to go and talk to him. There's a Conquer World Championship is happening over in Norfolk. I want to go and cover that. And they write back and say yes. Woo! It's all, you know. It's it's like getting commissioned every single time.
Yeah, yeah. You just come up with a great idea and they go for it and pay you to go.
We'll pay you £400 for to go and cover this story, to spend a week writing it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Wow, £400, awesome. And then you do the old spend it 3 times thing.
Yeah, this is true.
Yeah.
So having done that first trilogy, you then went on and did a second trilogy.
Yes.
Is it set in the same world?
No, it's completely different.
Set in America, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a very similar style. It's called West of West. It was because I wanted to go and travel about America, because what happened is my wife and I went on a road trip in America. I had grown up sort of, you know, thinking a bit like my reading. If you're going on holiday, you've got to go somewhere weird and dangerous with a backpack on. There's no other place to go. Whereas my wife had grown up, you know, in a very different background. She'd grown up sort of, you know, camping at best in France, sort of thing. So her idea was you know, a hotel somewhere, but somewhere first worldy, not somewhere frightening. So we compromised and road tripped in America because, you know, the car became our backpack and she chose our hotels. And I just fell massively in love with Western USA. I've been to East, I got family in the East Side, so I've been to East quite a bit, and I got family in Seattle too. And I've been there quite a bit and thought it was amazing, but I was just blown away by the desert. I just fell massively in love with it. I love the geology strip there. The wildlife's really good, strangely enough, because you can see it because there isn't much cover. Yeah. And so any excuse I go back there, and that was a really good excuse. So I decided to set a trilogy in the USA of Vikings traveling between Chicago and Las Vegas 1,000 years ago.
Oh, is this they crossed on the ice bridge? Is that
no? I mean, the Vikings were in America. There's a Viking village in Newfoundland. So Columbus very much wasn't the first European in America. And there are 2 sagas that cover this. But I reckon they were in America more, because the Vikings wrote, I can't remember how many sagas, but it wasn't many. And they wrote very little. We know very little about the Vikings. So I reckon they were in America more than we think. And I think they were the bravest people ever, the Vikings. They had this philosophy, you die when you die, which is the title of the first book of that trilogy. So your day of your death is set. So whatever you did, doesn't matter. You could jump off a cliff. If you died, that's because you were meant to die that day. Yeah. But if you weren't, you wouldn't die. So they master traveled across America. So I took this a bit further. So the trilogy starts with a bunch of Vikings living near Chicago on the edge of Lake Michigan. Not Chicago, wasn't there? Yeah. And they've got really sort of lazy and useless after 100 years of being fated as gods by the local Indians. They have just become this useless, lazy bunch of weirdos. And then one day, the bigger empire further south decides to kill them all. So that's how it begins. And what was fascinating is researching it, is, you know, you researching Native Americans and realizing that, I mean, the term Native Americans is severely problematic. It's like, it's not problematic. I mean, that's a modern language way of saying it. Basically, it's like saying Europeans. It's like judging people in a group as Native Americans is like saying, oh my God, you're English, so you must like feta cheese and olives. You know, it's they're a very disparate group. They're very, very, very varied, and there were huge empires. We don't know what happened to them. There was this place in St. Louis, a place called Cahokia, where there were pyramids, and a town that's in 1,000 years ago was larger than London at the time. Nobody knows why it went into decline 200 years later. But anyway, that's where I've based my baddies in my book. There are these awesome towns in Colorado, in a place called Mesa Verde, where they've just dug, it looks like a Cornish stone village, dug into the clefts of a cliff. There's all this groovy stuff around that I didn't know about. So it was really fun to research and make a story based around that, and then run Vikings through it. This bunch of idiots Vikings. I think possibly the reason my second trilogy didn't do as well as my first is that I based the protagonist, the main guy, on me, age 19. I found some diaries of me backpacking in India and Thailand, where I was just an absolute band, you know, just so lacking all sorts of self-awareness, absolute arse, you know, heart in the right place, but so self-obsessed, so girl-obsessed, you know, completely. And really confused why women weren't going for him. That was my main character. So yeah, he's the main guy, and he's not that appealing.
Did you find it was having written that first trilogy and then coming to write the second trilogy? Did you find it any easier? Because when I first did my first trilogy, I had a plan in mind, but it's all about that first book. You spend so much time working on the first book and trying to get an agent and trying to get a publisher. And once you got the deal, it's like, right, now you start working on the second one and plan how the third one's going to wrap it all up. So when you come to do that second trilogy, was it any easier, or were you still coming up against the same problems, or the same struggles, I guess, rather than problems?
I think it was probably easier because I think you hit the nail on the head. And I don't know if you were the same, but for the first trilogy, I had the first book absolutely sorted. And I was like, what do I do next? Whereas for my second trilogy, I started with the end. I knew it was going to happen at the end. And so I just had to get there with lots of hilarity and bloodshed all along the way. So
do you plan your books quite a lot, or do you still just see how it goes and develops?
No, I'm a planner.
Okay. Yeah, me too.
Mainly, I mean, I hate the word pantser so much. I'm not sure I could be one. You know, and I know Stephen King is a pantser.
We could say gardener. That's the nicer term. Gardeners and architects. Those are the other ends of the spectrum.
I don't like that either. I don't know a gardener. I don't like the term.
Do you like gardeners?
Gardeners, you know, I'm impressed and pleased that people do garden. The world looks better because of you, gardeners.
No, I build, so I'm an architect or a planner, if you like, as well. Yeah, I have to. I can't. I wrote a novel once, just making up as I went along, and it was a huge mess. And I thought, right, well, go back and fix it. And it was such a mess that I couldn't. I'd have to start it again. I have to rip it up from the roots and use the same ideas, but to write a whole book again. And then after I planned it all out again and spent another year writing it, I thought, no, this isn't for me. I've learned my lesson. Planning is the way forward.
I think so. Although Stephen King makes a character and then has a weird situation and goes from there.
Yeah, but he also describes it as brushing the dust off a fossil, where he's got the bones of it, and as he works his way through it, he's constantly revising it and like taking a bit more of the dust off until he can see what it looks like.
Do you do that? Do you edit as you go along? Do you write one night and then go back to the beginning of it the following night?
No, I'll go back only a little bit to remind me of where I was. If I haven't finished at a good point when I'm writing, like an end of a chapter. If I get to the end of a chapter and I've got an hour left of writing, I'll just stop for the day. I'd rather come in the next day and start a new chapter rather than be, 500 words in and be like, no. So I'll look back at what I've done the previous day, just to remind myself if I need it, and then I'll move forward again. I might tweak the odd word, but I don't constantly go back and forth. It's that idea of you've got a deadline, you've got this many months to get to the end of that first draft. You've got to hit it. You've got to do it, because this persists, right? It really annoys me. A lot of readers, well, some readers, that's unfair. Some readers will say, I'll only read a series when it's finished, when it's all come out, because of the unreliability of half a dozen fantasy authors.
Martin, thank you very much.
Him and others who are less forthcoming about the reasons, and some are very forthcoming and have explained why they're struggling. Some have not put a book out for 8 or 10 years in the series. And because of that, the rest of us have been tarred with the same brush, even though 80-90% of authors release their books on time and meet their deadlines on time.
Yeah, I think you have to be fairly lenient with readers. I mean, they are the reason we can do what we do.
But equally, they shouldn't blame us for the mistakes of others, is my point. That, because someone else messed up with their deadline. I've always hit mine, or I've been early on mine. So
yeah, but your books are still going to be, just excuse me 1 second, I will carry on talking. Your books are still going to be a year apart, aren't they?
Most of the time, yeah. It depends on how fast the publishing schedule is and what they're going to do. I mean, they brought out my second and third book a lot faster. I think they did with yours as well.
Yeah,
A
yeah.
six
I think it was 6 months.
six
Actually,
months
yes,
gap.
it was my third book was 5 years ago because there were 6 months gaps between them. Yeah.
So yeah, they gave me a longer lead time to work
Mm.
on 2 and 3, and then we had September, April, and then I think September. So it's only 12 calendar months, and you've had a whole trilogy.
But I mean, I do think. Are you the same? That the best book I've ever written is the next book. You know,
Probably.
yeah, the book that's coming. This is one I rehearse. You know, showing my age, being on Wogan for. You know.
Shame he's been dead for 10 years.
Rest in peace, Terry. Yeah, yeah, exactly. But you know, I practice my chat show, which I guess would be like this. Yeah.
You'll
So you
walk
know,
on and laugh.
yeah.
As
So
long as you
Angus,
don't
it's
go
the
Nicolas
best-selling book
Cage.
in history ever. Yeah. Hmm?
As long as you don't go
What?
on Nicolas Cage like he did when he came on Wogan.
Oh, he came on. Yeah, yeah,
Have
and
you
then
seen
Dance
that?
Gentleman. Yeah.
He's like comes out, he's
Yes, I
throwing
have.
money, he does a karate kick, he does a forward roll, and he's just absolutely probably coked off his head. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
I think that's okay. I think I won't do that. I'm going to go for the modest thing. Yeah, or it may be the best-selling book ever, but I'm just lucky.
It's probably gonna be Graham
Really,
Norton now.
really great for the readers. Really great for the readers. That's it. That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And I mean, the Tom Cruise jumping on the sofa is the worst thing that's ever happened with anyone being
Oh,
interviewed.
that was way over the top. That was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. Here's a good question. I wrote down.
Okay.
What's the worst piece of advice, writing advice, you've ever been given?
Well, I mean, a piece of advice you see often is don't write about characters that you haven't lived, which is often political now, and that is just nonsense. It annoys the hell out of me. It's why you have an imagination. So that is a terrible piece of writing advice.
Yeah, write what you know is the other way of phrasing it. People say, and I think that's basically what you said, and I agree. It's a horrible piece of advice.
And it's interesting. I mean, to a degree, I agree with it. In that, I mean, I'm writing at the moment, and I've got an agent who is saying, include a more diverse cast, which is absolutely fine. I can do that, although I kind of do it anyway. But if you want to include someone French, I can muck around with English names. I can call somebody something like, I met a guy the other day called Piers Bollard and his wife Emma Bollard, and I think this is two of the best names ever. Emma and Piers Bollard, brilliant names. And I understand why they're brilliant names. To me, nobody else in the whole world might get this, but I think they're cool. And they're very, I'd like to use those as character names. I can't do that in French, even though I speak reasonable French. I can't be as I don't think I can be as funny or appealing in my writing in a different language. Or in a different culture. So there is something in there, right? But if I was only going to write about fat guys approaching their 50s who wish they were thinner, then
it'd be a boring story. It's just a biography.
Actually, it's not a terrible idea. Yeah, I mean, you will always get a character in my books with that, but I like the idea of writing from a female perspective or writing from an Australian perspective or whatever. It's fun to read and research and write things out. Now, you've recently written a book on bad and good advice given to writers.
Yeah, and one of my things is don't write what you know, because
hang on.
Hello.
So no one else likes your cats. No one else finds cats appealing.
What's the name of that cat?
That cat is called Napa, named after the valley in America.
Nice.
When we got cats.
Hello, Napa. My cats are both asleep, so they won't be making an appearance. So write what you know suggests that you only write characters that you've met or people that you've experienced of or things you've experienced of. On the one hand, yes, I can see it makes sense because people think that therefore you won't get it wrong, you won't offend anybody. But on the other hand, if all I'm doing is writing about the things that I've experienced, it's quite a boring fantasy book. Fantasy books are full of wizards and killers and kings and queens and all sorts of weird non-human race. I've got non-human races in my books. So I think as long as you treat everything with respect, you do your homework. I mean, you always get this wrong. I don't think I mentioned this to you, but for my birthday a couple of years ago, my brother said, what do you want to do? And I said, I don't want a thing. Let's go and do something for the day. And he said, all right, what? I said, let's go and do like blacksmithing for a day. I've written about blacksmiths in all my books, making swords. And he goes, okay, I found a place near me. You can come with me a blacksmith for the day and make a sword. Brilliant. We went down, we spent the whole day with the blacksmiths. I made a sword, sort of, and thereafter I apologized to the blacksmith and said, I'm so sorry, I've got everything wrong. I've done all my homework and I still got it wrong. And they were like, yeah, we know. And obviously you can't make a sword in a day. When I said that to them, they just laughed, because it's not possible to actually make a real sword in a day. I made a crap sword that he said, what are you going to do with it? I said, I'm going to hang it on the wall. He said, okay. If you said you were going to go out and do, cover it in foam and hit people with it, do some LARPing, I would have changed the way we were doing it. He said, but because you're just hanging it on a wall, I don't need to worry about it falling apart. But I'd done my homework. I'd read about blacksmiths, and I still got it wrong. So going forward, I'll do better. But I think that's all you can do is do your research.
I'm really old school. I do my homework, but I don't think you have to. I think you're writing. It doesn't matter. You can write whatever the hell you want. Get it wrong. It's okay. It shouldn't matter. If you get it wrong, you get it wrong. People can take it for whatever it is. People should be able to judge and say, no, well, this book's rubbish, and they won't read it, or they will read it and find it hilarious.
But we're not seeking to go out and offend people on purpose. We're just writing about things.
But I just moved to New Forest. If someone from San Francisco wrote a book on the New Forest and it just got it entirely wrong, didn't understand English people, had never met one, it wouldn't. It's not offensive. It's funny, or it's shit. It's one of the two. Or you can ignore it, or you can laugh at it, or that's it. The thing not to do is take it seriously and get all upset about it. Why would you?